Michelle mocked Jasmine Crockett's law degree. 45 seconds later, he crushed her. One fact might surprise you. Communication studies show that as many as 1 in 5 voters admits they've shifted opinions in debates because of a single memorable line. Imagine that, one sharp sentence instantly changing the balance of credibility. In politics, power doesn't always come from hour-long speeches. Often, it hangs on a razor edge, just one response, one perfectly delivered moment. And in this story, that's exactly what happened. Michelle tried to embarrass Jasmine Crockett by mocking her law degree, but less than a minute later, Crockett flipped the tone entirely with one calm, devastating line. By the end, the room wasn't laughing at her. They were listening to her. So let me ask you, if somebody mocked your expertise in front of a full audience, what would you do? Would you lash back? Would you stay quiet? Or would you wait and drop the one line that changes everything? Comment with the comeback you would have used. How much weight does a single insult actually carry in politics? Imagine yourself sitting in a charged hearing room, television cameras rolling, the tension so thick you can almost hear the pulse of the nation. In that environment, even the smallest jab is amplified, especially when the target is someone's education, career, or credibility. Yet history has shown us again and again, mockery might draw cheap laughs, but it rarely secures a real win. In Jasmine Crockett's case, Michelle's jab at her law degree seemed designed to reduce her stature, to suggest her accomplishments weren't as weighty as she believed. But here's the irony. Insults like that almost never achieve the goal. Why? Because when you attack someone's credentials in the public square, you risk positioning yourself as petty rather than powerful. Audiences instinctively lean toward the person being singled out, not the aggressor. That's human psychology at work. Think about famous clashes we've seen in courtrooms and Congress alike. The person mocked often walks away with the sympathy of the crowd. When Crockett took that moment of apparent embarrassment and converted it into an opening, pausing, regathering, then flipping the remark with one simple but devastating response, she followed a timeless principle. Ridicule collapses under composure. Here's the lesson for anyone navigating conflict, whether in politics, work, or even daily conversation. When someone dismisses your experience or education, don't rush to defend yourself frantically. Let them expose their pettiness first, then respond with clarity and authority. That balance between patience and precision can transform you from the ridiculed into the respected. One phrase sums it up neatly. Mockery creates noise, but respect builds power. Takeaway: next time you're mocked, pause, and let calm become your sharpest weapon. Here's something most people don't realize. Attacking someone's academic credentials is actually one of the weakest strategies in modern politics. It might look cutting in the moment, but research shows people value authenticity, clarity, and emotional intelligence far above any formal title. In fact, polls have repeatedly shown that voters judge their leaders more on how they communicate under pressure than on what degrees they hold, and that's where Michelle misfired. By mocking Jasmine Crockett's law degree, she positioned herself on the wrong side of perception. Instead of appearing sharp and authoritative, the attack felt hollow, because credentials, whether in law or medicine or business, don't persuade by themselves. What persuades it is whether the person holding them demonstrates the essence behind it: knowledge, confidence, and poise. Crockett had all three sitting in her back pocket. History provides countless parallels. Remember when candidates like John F. Kennedy, Barack Obama, or even Ronald Reagan faced questions about their experience or formal qualifications? Their replies rarely listed bullet points of achievements. They pivoted toward calm delivery, big-picture vision, and relatability. Those moments remind us an audience doesn't connect to a resume, but to the strength shown when that resume is ridiculed. This dual reality is striking. Credentials alone don't sway people, yet mocking them usually backfires even faster. That's why Michelle's attempt was more dangerous to herself than to Crockett. She handed her opponent the ultimate gift, an opening to demonstrate poise while Michelle broadcasted insecurity. And the takeaway? Protect your credibility not by defending every slight, but by embodying composure and substance. People will remember how you handled the mockery, not the mockery itself. Picture this. A packed congressional hearing room buzzing with murmurs, cameras trained on every twitch of expression. Michelle leans in, her tone dripping with condescension, tossing out a jab at Jasmine Crockett's law degree. The air shifts. For a moment, it feels like Crockett has been knocked off balance, her accomplishments reduced to a punchline. The audience, both present and streaming across screens, holds its collective breath. What happens next is the moment that makes or breaks an entire exchange. Silence stretches, and here's the secret. Silence is power. In those few seconds, Crockett didn't scramble or lash back. She let the weight of Michelle's mockery hang in the air, exposing it for what it was: petty, insecure, and hollow. Then, when the timing was just right, she delivered one single line that reframed the entire dynamic. It wasn't wordy, it wasn't defensive, it was precise, sharp, and devastating. That's how a well-timed rebut outclasses even the most confident insult. Why does this matter? Because in the theater of politics or any high-stakes environment, timing can matter more than the words themselves. A fast comeback might impress a few, but a measured, crushing line after restraint commands respect. It mimics the rhythm of great trial lawyers. They don't interrupt every jab. They wait, observe, then dismantle their opponent with surgical clarity. Every one of us at some point enters our own version of this scenario, whether in the boardroom, a classroom, or even family disputes. That moment when someone tries to belittle you, it's tempting to react instantly. But Crockett's composure teaches something deeper. Pause is power. One crisp lesson stands out. Silence sets the stage. Timing delivers the knockout. So next time you're mocked, don't lunge, wait, and drop the line that lands. Have you ever noticed how the most powerful comebacks often come from those who've already been underestimated? One example that immediately comes to mind is Barack Obama during the 2008 campaign trail. Critics frequently mocked his lack of Washington experience, insinuating that his polished speeches were mere style over substance. Instead of shrinking under the weight of those jabs, Obama leaned in with humility and wit, at one point even joking about his funny name before pivoting into his vision for the country. That self-possession turned ridicule into rapport, mockery into momentum. This is the same energy Jasmine Crockett summoned when her law degree was mocked. She didn't bite the bait by reading off a list of her accomplishments like a resume. Instead, she understood what political figures like Obama, Kennedy, or even Reagan mastered: the art of transforming a jab into an opportunity to demonstrate composure. Once an insult is flipped into a strength, it becomes living proof of resilience. And resilience is far more persuasive than raw credentials. Think about this in your own life. Maybe in the workplace when someone makes a snide comment about your background, or in a classroom where peers underestimate your skills. Explaining and over-justifying your worth often dilutes authority, but a calm smile, a witty remark, or a precisely timed statement makes the attacker look small without you even lifting your voice. The anecdotal pattern is clear. Every great communicator has faced public mockery, and their victories didn't come from shouting down their critics. They came from tilting the narrative with grace. Here's the distilled wisdom. Owning your story beats defending your resume. So the next time someone mocks your background, don't defend, define. That's how respect is earned. When someone mocks your expertise, how should you respond? Do you explode in defense, proving your credentials in detail? Or do you recognize that the insult says more about them than about you? Too often, people waste energy trying to win by piling on facts. But here's the truth. Facts alone rarely convince anyone in the heat of confrontation. What wins is posture. Your ability to stand firm, calm, unshaken. Look at what Jasmine Crockett modeled in that hearing. Her power wasn't in rattling off cases she won as an attorney. It was in showing, not telling, that she belonged in the room. This principle applies everywhere, at work, in friendships, even in family disputes. Authority is not something you argue into existence, it's something you embody. So how do you do it? First, resist the urge to react fast. A pause disarms tension faster than a flurry of words. Second, clarify your value with one line, not a lecture. Crockett didn't ramble. She landed a targeted blow at the perfect moment. Third, reframe the attack. Turn the mockery into proof of your strength, not evidence of your insecurity. That shift flips sympathy every time. Here's a practical step. Prepare 1 or 2 concise phrases that affirm your worth without bragging. Think of them like verbal shields. For example, if someone sneers at your background, you could calmly remark, "Funny how results matter more than resumes." It calms the moment and redirects the spotlight. Because the formula is simple: respect plus wit equals authority. Takeaway: let insults roll past you, then redirect with brevity and confidence. The one who controls emotion ultimately controls the room. There's a story from a courtroom in Texas that illustrates this perfectly. A young defense attorney, fresh out of law school, stood against a seasoned prosecutor who had been practicing for decades. Mid-hearing, the prosecutor smirked, looking directly at the jury, and said, "Well, unlike my colleague here, I actually have years of experience to know what I'm talking about." The jab drew muted chuckles from the room. The attorney could have folded, could have scrambled to insist her degree was valid or that she had studied under prestigious mentors, but instead she simply paused, smiled warmly at the jury, and replied, "You know, that may be true, but fresh eyes see what habits often miss." The room shifted instantly. What was supposed to be a humiliation became a clever turn that not only neutralized the insult, but actually highlighted her unique advantage: freshness, perspective, energy. The jury nodded along, sensing the confidence that wasn't loud but unshakable. This is the exact dynamic we saw with Jasmine Crockett. When Michelle mocked her law degree, Crockett knew the power wasn't in rattling off credentials, but in demonstrating composure that audiences crave. The mini-story proves the point. Insults only succeed if you give them room to grow. A calm, reframed answer shrinks them to dust. The broader lesson applies far beyond courtrooms or congressional hearings. In life, people will question your experience, your background, your legitimacy. You don't beat them by wrestling in the mud. You rise by reframing, by showing the insult as proof of your opponent's weakness. One line says it best: pressure builds diamonds. Here's a twist you probably didn't expect. Surveys have shown that while trust in Congress as an institution hovers painfully low, often around 15 to 20%, trust in individual professions represented within Congress tells a different story. For example, polls consistently reveal that Americans tend to trust lawyers more during oversight hearings than they trust Congress itself. Lawyers, despite their jokes about reputations, score higher when they're viewed as defending principles, questioning power, or standing firm under attack. That's fact number 1. Now here's fact number 2. When politicians publicly mock professional expertise, especially when it's tied to law, medicine, or military service, the blowback almost always damages the attacker's favorability. Why? Because voters see the assault not as a critique of credentials, but as an insecure swipe at competence. One recent study on televised debates confirmed that candidates using credential-shaming strategies routinely scored lower in post-debate likability surveys than their calmer, more composed rivals. Put those two facts together. People instinctively lean toward respecting training and achievement, and they instinctively recoil when someone tries to diminish it. So when Michelle attempted to tear into Crockett's law degree, the long-term impact was inevitable. The attack didn't lower Crockett's standing, it lowered Michelle's. She underestimated how credibility works in front of real-world audiences. Here's the punchline boiled down. That's political suicide. And your takeaway? Never diminish someone's hard-earned expertise, even if you disagree with them. Because the instant you do, you're no longer arguing ideas, you're revealing your insecurity. Instead, challenge arguments, not accomplishments. Respect earns respect. Mockery earns backlash. There's a timeless line from the 18th century English writer Thomas Fuller: "Mockery is the weapon of the weak." It's harsh, but it rings true across centuries of political and personal conflict. When someone relies on mocking credentials instead of matching ideas, they reveal cracks in their own foundation. They're waving a flag that says, "I can't win with substance, so I'll try with insult." Now place that lens over Michelle's jab at Jasmine Crockett's law degree. It didn't feel like strength. It felt like substitution. Instead of confronting Crockett's arguments, Michelle was undermining her background, and the moment Crockett chose restraint before delivering her surgical one-liner, the truth of Fuller's quote came alive. The strong don't mock, they dismantle with clarity. Crockett knew that the best demolition sometimes takes only a single precise stroke. Communication experts often emphasize that the effectiveness of a comeback lies less in the words themselves and more in the timing. Crockett's response embodies that principle. She didn't rush to fill the silence. She let Michelle's words echo first, so that when her own line hit, it felt like both a rebuttal and a revelation. That's how sharp rhetoric works. It flips the mirror, showing who's truly prepared and who's reaching. Here's the real-world lesson. The strongest leaders don't waste time tearing down resumes. They expose weak arguments by elevating strong responses. In everyday life, whether someone belittles your job title, your education level, or even your background, you can choose the fuller principle. Don't fight with method. Mockery. Fight with composure. One sentence captures it clean. Restraint speaks louder than ridicule. Politics today is starting to resemble something far closer to a courtroom than the long-winded town halls of the past. Voters aren't waiting for 40-minute speeches anymore. They're tuned in for moments, those 20-second clips that get replayed, shared, and memed across every platform within minutes. The future of political persuasion isn't in lengthy manifestos, it's in sharp exchanges, well-timed pauses, and one-sentence kills that stick. What Jasmine Crockett did in that instant with Michelle is exactly what tomorrow's politics demands. One precise line can now overshadow an entire debate. Think about it. Millions may never watch a full committee hearing, but a clipped viral moment? That spreads like wildfire. Studies on digital media consumption show that attention spans for news have shrunk dramatically, sometimes under a minute on platforms like TikTok. In that environment, the winner is whoever can land the most concise, credible strike. This trend isn't limited to politics. Corporate leaders get judged on their sound bites in press conferences. Athletes face media moments that can redefine their reputations in seconds. Even teachers and students find short clips of their responses online, shaping how others perceive them. The rise of clip culture means rhetoric has been compressed into an art form of brevity and impact. So here's the future lesson that Crockett's exchange foreshadows. Mastering the 15-word rebuttal is no longer an optional skill. It's the core of influence. Those who adapt to this reality will shape narratives. Those who don't will get reduced to the punchline of someone else's clip, condensed into power. One sentence can build or break your legacy. That's the battlefield we're all stepping into. Are you prepared for it? If you're loving this breakdown of strategic moments and want to keep sharpening your eye for these knockout extra, then make sure you subscribe right now, because each week we dissect moments where one sentence changed everything and teach you how to use those same skills in your own world. Don't miss the next play-by-play. Imagine for a moment that Michelle's attack had actually succeeded. Picture Jasmine Crockett fumbling in that hearing, stammering to explain why her law degree mattered, frantically listing accomplishments that sounded more defensive than dignified. The cameras would have captured every flicker of discomfort, and within minutes, those clips would have been spliced and spread as proof that she wasn't prepared for the spotlight. Political careers, after all, have been undone by far less. This is the razor's edge of credibility in public life, what one slip, one poorly handled insult can do. Legitimacy in the eyes of an audience is a fragile thing. It's like glass, solid while intact, but shatter it once and the cracks never fully disappear. A single display of weakness in the heat of confrontation can be magnified beyond measure. That's why Crockett's poise wasn't just impressive, it was essential. By holding her ground with silence and then flipping the insult on its head, she prevented a narrative collapse. She showed strength when it mattered most, turning what could have been a credibility crisis into a credibility boost. Every viewer who might have thought, "Is her degree really strong enough?" instead thought, "Wow, she didn't even flinch." The real-world implication is clear. Whether you're on stage, in a board meeting, or even handling criticism from a colleague, your authority sits on thin ice under pressure. Protect it by keeping your anchor steady, confidence, calm, and clarity. If you let mockery crack that anchor, perception slips away. Here's the lasting phrase: credibility breaks faster than it builds. Here's a reality the public often overlooks. Congress is surprisingly full of attorneys. In fact, over 1/3 of current members of Congress hold law degrees, making it the single most common professional background in Washington. That's fact number one. Whether you agree with their politics or not, the legal training shapes how hearings are conducted, precision in questioning, skill in argument, and an instinct for finding weak points. It's no accident that lawyers tend to dominate the spotlight during televised exchanges. Now here's fact number two. Mocking that very expertise usually backfires almost immediately. The media rarely remembers the mocker's punchline. Instead, cameras linger on the reaction of the target, and history shows the aftermath is particularly brutal for the aggressor. Analysts studying competitive debates found that personal jabs about education or career nearly always resulted in long-term credibility loss for the attacker. Why? Because voters don't like arrogance disguised as wit. They want strength paired with respect, not cheap shots. Put these two realities together, and the lesson is unavoidable. When Michelle tried to mock Jasmine Crockett's law background, she wasn't attacking a weak point, she was attacking the single most common source of authority inside Congress itself. It's like heckling a musician for knowing too much about music. The crowd doesn't laugh with you, they turn against you. Practical takeaway: never go after credentials that define the arena you're standing in. In any environment, whether politics, business, or life, the fastest way to lose credibility is to belittle the very skills the audience values most. History has a way of punishing arrogance. Take the 1988 presidential debates between George H.W. Bush and Michael Dukakis. At one point, critics and media voices frequently mocked Bush for coming across as awkward, even unpolished, compared to Dukakis's academic precision. But here's the twist. Bush leaned directly into his supposed weakness, framing himself as the practical, seasoned man of action rather than the polished professor. Dukakis's heavy leaning on credentials and intellectual aura backfired in perception. By election day, it was Bush who captured the presidency, proving that underestimating an opponent's ability to connect can turn into humiliation for the mocker. Now shift back to Jasmine Crockett's moment. Michelle's attempt to belittle her law degree mirrored that same arrogance. Instead of casting doubt on Crockett, it highlighted Michelle's miscalculation. Forgetting the public instinctively respects the grit tied to credentials, not the attempt to demean them. Crockett never defended her degree like a fragile heirloom. She reframed it, letting the mockery hang before answering with commanding brevity. In doing so, she turned Michelle's put-down into a mirror, reflecting Michelle's insecurity. The broader lesson is universal. Underestimate someone's background at your own peril. In business, people laugh at young upstarts until those very upstarts reshape industries. In classrooms, students dismissed as average eventually outshine their critics with persistence and vision. Attacks on credentials almost always age poorly. Here's the distilled principle: mock the foundation and you collapse your own roof. So when you encounter arrogance aimed at undermining academic or professional strengths, recognize it for what it is: a trembling hand disguised as confidence. Honor your foundation and let their mockery become their undoing. What matters more in the heat of confrontation, a degree printed on paper or performance under pressure? It's a question worth pausing on, because credentials can open doors, but character and composure decide whether you stay in the room. Michelle tried to undermine Jasmine Crockett by attacking the former, her law degree, but Crockett reminded everyone watching that true credibility is confirmed not by the ink on your resume, but by how you carry yourself when fire is directed at you. Think about it. You could hold the most prestigious qualifications from Ivy League schools or decades of professional experience. Yet if, in one critical moment, you crumble under an insult, all that pedigree can look paper thin. Conversely, you might have fewer credentials than others. But if you demonstrate clarity, poise, and timing when tested, people will lean toward you as the leader in the room. That's why courtroom dramas are so gripping. Jurors don't trust the thickest binders of evidence alone. They trust the person who stands with calm conviction while presenting it. In that congressional hearing, Crockett's single sentence was worth more than 100 framed diplomas. Why? Because she showcased earned authority, credibility forged in resilience. The world doesn't measure leaders by what's filed in their past. It measures them by how they rise in tense, defining moments. Here's the real kicker: brains must meet voice. Knowledge without expression gets ignored. Expression without knowledge rings hollow. The two fuse together. That's influence. So the next time you wonder whether your education or your composure matters more, remember, paper may print prestige, but performance cements power. And when forced to choose, performance always wins the crowd. Here's something you might not expect. In rhetoric, the silence before a response can often be more powerful than the response itself. That pause isn't emptiness, it's strategy. And Jasmine Crockett used it like a scalpel. When Michelle mocked her law degree, Crockett didn't immediately fling words back in a defensive sprint. She let silence breathe. That beat, the stillness, shifted the energy in the room completely. The audience, both live and on camera, leaned into that pause, hungry to hear how she'd reply. By the time she finally spoke, her words carried double the weight. This truth often gets overlooked. People rarely remember the instant reaction, but they almost always remember the composed comeback. Studies in communication show that when leaders delay even a short moment before answering an attack, their words land with more authority. It signals control, intelligence, and calm, all traits audiences crave in someone leading a tense exchange. Quick, reactive overtalk often reads as insecurity. Measured silence reads as command. Think about real-life parallels. In job interviews, the candidate who pauses to consider before answering often appears smarter than the one blurting instantly. In arguments, the person who absorbs first and then carefully speaks controls the tone. Performance coaches even advise executives to own the pause, because it makes every subsequent word more deliberate and resonant. So while Michelle's mockery may have been loud, Crockett's restraint was louder. The surprise is this: Crockett's pause, not her punchline alone, is what won the room. Captured in one crystallized phrase, "Hold fire, then strike." There's a famous insight from communication scholar Deborah Tannen, who observed, "When the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser." That single line slices apart a common misconception in politics, that going personal somehow proves dominance. In truth, personal attacks are often the hallmark of rhetorical poverty. They don't demonstrate what they reveal insecurity. Here's the myth we need to debunk. Many people believe attacking credentials, background, or personality automatically weakens the target, but research shows the opposite. Audiences frequently feel a subconscious sympathy for the person under fire. In debate studies conducted by Princeton, candidates who relied heavily on character slander consistently ranked lower in audience likability than those who kept their attacks confined to policy disagreements. The crowd may laugh in the moment, but ultimately they distrust insults that smell like desperation. Michelle's insult toward Jasmine Crockett's law degree fell straight into this trap. Instead of looking sharp, she looked petty. Instead of diminishing Crockett's standing, she diminished her own. And Crockett, by refusing to wrestle in the mud, reinforced the principle perfectly. The one who avoids slander comes out stronger. That's not coincidence. That's communication psychology at work. Translate this to daily life. If a colleague mocks your background, your intelligence, or your lack of experience, recognize it as proof, not of your weakness, but of their emptiness. Don't volley the insult back. Expose their insecurity by rising above it with composure. Here's the punchline: mockery eats its master. We live in an era where one sentence doesn't just stay in the room, it can define an entire career overnight. Social media has transformed politics into a reel-based battlefield where the sharpest exchanges cycle endlessly across TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. Here's the emerging trend. Politicians and public figures are no longer judged by their policy papers or lengthy speeches, but by the viral potency of a few words well placed. Take Crockett's exchange with Michelle. Had this moment happened in the 1990s, it might have made a brief headline in tomorrow's paper and quietly disappeared. Today, that one-liner gets clipped, shared, stitched by political commentators, and viewed millions of times globally within hours. The future of influence is no longer won in hardcover books or hour-long town halls. It's crystallized in short-form content capable of rewriting perception instantly. And this trend isn't confined to politics. CEOs addressing crises, athletes in post-game interviews, even teachers filmed in class. Clips can elevate or destroy reputations in ways unimaginable a decade ago. Attention spans shrink, but scrutiny multiplies. Everyone is one sentence away from either virality or vulnerability. For leaders, professionals, or even everyday people, the takeaway is critical. You must learn to command the clip moment. That means choosing words with brevity, timing with precision, and embodying composure as if every encounter will be clipped and shared, because odds are, it will. One distilled phrase says it all. One line can outlive a lifetime. Jasmine Crockett's sharp timing placed her on the winning side of this trend. The mockery vanished fast, but her poised rebuttal keeps echoing far beyond the room. Think back to some of the most famous one-liners in political and cultural history. Ronald Reagan, during the 1984 presidential debate, faced criticism for being the oldest candidate ever to run at the time. When asked if his age might limit his ability, Reagan didn't get defensive, nor did he recite medical reports. Instead, he smiled and quipped, "I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience." The audience erupted. His opponent laughed nervously, and with that single line, Reagan evaporated the age question for the rest of the campaign. Or consider Lloyd Benson's devastating retort to Dan Quayle in 1988. Quayle compared himself to John F. Kennedy, trying to elevate his perceived stature. Benson calmly replied, "E.T. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy." That sentence became one of the most referenced zingers in debate history. Decades later, people may forget entire platforms, but they never forget that line. Now compare those moments to Jasmine Crockett's poised comeback. Like Reagan and Benson, she recognized that power in rhetoric lies not in pages of arguments, but in the unforgettable brevity of a perfectly aimed remark. Michelle's mockery was forgettable noise. Crockett's one sentence cut through the din and is destined to echo in highlight reels far longer than Michelle's words. The common thread is crystal clear. Audiences don't rewind lengthy lectures, but they immortalize sharp, concise strikes. In politics, business, or even personal life, your reputation often hinges on how effectively you craft your zinger moment. Here's the condensed wisdom. Zingers live forever. So the next time you're cornered in an argument, don't scramble with paragraphs. Prepare for your one unforgettable line, the one people will still recall years later. At the core of this entire exchange between Michelle and Jasmine Crockett lies a universal truth. Mockery is momentary, but respect is lasting. Michelle chose the easy road, throwing shade at a law degree. Crockett chose the harder, wiser road, pausing, absorbing, and responding with precision. The result? One woman looked petty, the other looked powerful. The difference wasn't just in words, but in composure. And here's what matters for you. These dynamics play out far beyond congressional hearings. In your workplace, someone might mock your background or downplay your expertise. Among friends or family, someone might take a jab to feel taller while trying to drag you lower. In those moments, you stand at the same crossroads Crockett did. Do you react instantly, defending yourself with frantic energy? Or do you pause, wait out the silence, and answer with a single clear strike? That choice determines whether the insult defines you or your response defines the insult. Across history and across our personal lives, credibility isn't maintained by proving every small criticism wrong. It's earned by holding firm when others try to cheapen your worth. Crockett's win wasn't about a resume line. It was about posture, patience, and precision. And that's a strategy every single one of us can apply. So when you face mockery, remember this distilled truth. Respect lasts, mockery fades. Carry that with you, whether you're leading a team, debating an idea, or simply navigating everyday challenges. Timing, restraint, and clarity always outshine ridicule. Crockett's one sentence was more than a comeback. It was a masterclass in composure. And the next masterclass moment, it's waiting for you, the next time someone underestimates your strength. So here's the arc in its entirety. Michelle mocked Crockett's credentials, expecting to plant doubt. Instead, her attack backfired, gifting Crockett the stage. What looked like ridicule became an opening. What felt like a moment of embarrassment transformed into a viral display of strength. The lessons ripple wider than politics. In debates, in classrooms, in job interviews, even everyday disputes, mockery fades fast, composure endures. Crockett's one sentence might have been born in a congressional hearing, but its echo reminds us all, the way you carry yourself is often louder than the titles beneath your name. And if you're ready for more breakdowns of strategy and resilience, stay tuned, because in the next episode, we're diving into another unforgettable reversal that left everyone stunned. If Crockett's calm inspired you, the next one might challenge you even more.